This bill is worth nothing. In 1923, this was the largest banknote ever printed in Germany. 100 trillion marks. A number so big, your brain refuses to picture it. So let me give you scale. When the war began in 1914, every mark in all of Germany, every coin, every note, in every pocket, and every bank, added up to about 6 billion. This single piece of paper says 100 trillion. One note, worth more than the entire money supply of the nation a decade before. In 1923, it bought one loaf of bread. This is the story of how a country with the most advanced economy in continental Europe, Beethoven, Goethe, Einstein, the world's best engineers, woke up one morning to find its money had turned into wallpaper, literal wallpaper. Germans pasted banknotes to their walls because they were cheaper than buying paper. Kids played in the streets with stacks of cash because they cost less than wooden blocks. Workers carried wages home in wheelbarrows. And some had their wheelbarrows stolen by thieves who tipped out the money and ran off with the wheelbarrow. The money was worthless. The wheelbarrow was real. So how does this happen? How does Europe's richest economy destroy its own currency in 5 years? The textbook answer is, they printed too much money. The textbook answer is wrong, or at least dangerously incomplete. This is the real story. Chapter 1. How a War Becomes a Bill. 1914. World War I begins, and every country fighting has the same brutal math problem. Wars cost an obscene amount of money, way more than any normal tax base can pay for. Britain raises taxes. France raises taxes. The United States raises taxes. They also sell war bonds to their own citizens. Painful, slow, but accountable. Germany does something different. Germany passes a law in 1914 that says, and I'm simplifying, the central bank doesn't have to hold gold to back the mark anymore. The Reichsbank can just print marks whenever the government needs them. The government tells the public, don't worry, we'll pay it all back after we win, with reparations. From France, then they lose. 1919, the winners draft the Treaty of Versailles. The headline number, 132 billion gold marks. In today's money, roughly $400 billion. To be paid by a country that had just spent 4 years burning its industrial base. The British economist John Maynard Keynes is in the room when this is decided. He calls it a Carthaginian peace, a peace deliberately designed to destroy the loser. He warns, if you do this, Germany will collapse, and Germany's collapse will destroy Europe. Then he resigns in protest and writes a book about it. Nobody listens. Meanwhile, in Berlin, meet Erika. Erika is 28, lives in a small apartment in Charlottenburg. Her husband Friedrich died outside Verdun in 1916. The German government paid his life insurance in 1920, 30,000 marks. That was a fortune, enough to buy a small house, enough to send her son Wilhelm to university someday, enough to never worry about rent again. Erika does what every responsible widow does. She puts it in the bank, a savings book, a Sparbook, with her name and Wilhelm's name on it. Insurance for the future. Chapter 2. The Slow Slide. 1921, 22. The mark slowly weakens. In 1914, $1 bought 4 marks. By the start of 1922, 190 marks. By the end of that year, 7,000. Most Germans see the numbers and don't quite believe them. Prices are rising. Bread, beer, coal, but wages are also rising. Sort of. And life feels normal-ish. Economists call this money illusion. People think in nominal terms. They earn more marks than last year. They feel richer. They don't notice that the marks buy less. Erika notices the baker's loaf cost 2 marks last spring, 5 marks today. She mentions it to her neighbor. The neighbor shrugs. Inflation, she says. It will pass. It does not pass. June 1922. Foreign Minister Walter Rathenau is assassinated by far-right nationalists, shot in his car driving to work. Rathenau had been negotiating Germany's reparations down. He had been trying to stabilize the mark. The day after his death, the mark falls 30% in a week. Foreign investors panic. Markets always punish chaos. Erika still has her Sparbuch. The number hasn't changed. 30,000 marks. But it now buys 1/10 of what it bought 2 years ago. She doesn't fully realize this. The number on the paper is the same. This is the deepest danger of paper. A number can stay the same, while what it represents disappears. By December 1922, a loaf of bread costs 160 marks, up from 2 marks the year before, 80 times more. But this is just the warm-up. The real disaster is 3 months away. Chapter 3. France marches in. January 1923. Germany misses a scheduled reparations payment. It's not a huge one, symbolic mostly. They miss it because they literally don't have the gold to send. France and Belgium respond with troops. 60,000 French and Belgian soldiers march into the Ruhr, Germany's industrial heart. The Ruhr produces 80% of Germany's coal, 80% of its steel. France's message: if you won't pay us in money, you'll pay us in coal and steel. We're taking it. The German government has no income from the Ruhr now, and no way to fight France for it. Versailles had capped their entire army at 100,000 men. So they do the only thing they can do. They call a general strike. Passive resistance. They tell every German worker in the Ruhr, don't go to work, don't help the French. We will pay your wages. But with what? There is only one answer. They print it. The Reichsbank turns on the printing presses and does not turn them off again for 9 months. They start so many presses that they run out of paper. So they print on one side of the note only. They run out of ink. So they print using ink so weak that the bills smear when you touch them. They start contracting with 133 private printing firms across Germany, running 1,700 presses, day and night. Print whatever marks you can. Give them to us. We'll stamp them official. January 1923, $1 buys 18,000 marks. July, 350,000. August, 4.6 million. Erika walks to the bakery. The loaf costs 200,000 marks. Next day, 600,000. End of the week, 2 million. She still has her Sparbuch, 30,000 marks. That number, the number she watched grow in 1920 when the insurance came through, the number that was supposed to send Wilhelm to university, now buys nothing. Not one loaf, not half a loaf. Nothing. But here's the part that breaks the brain. This is not the bottom yet. The bottom is still 2 months away. Chapter 4. Vertical. By the fall of 1923, the mark isn't falling anymore. It's vertical. September, $1 buys 99 million marks. October, 25 billion. November, 4.2 trillion marks per dollar. Let me say that again because the number is too big to feel. 4.2 trillion marks. For $1, Germany prints a 100 billion mark note. By the time it's distributed, worth less than a postage stamp, they print a trillion mark note. Same story. They finally print the most famous bill in monetary history, the 100 trillion mark note, and it buys, depending on the day, about 1 egg. Daily life in Berlin becomes surreal. Workers are paid twice a day, once in the morning, once at noon. Why? Because if you got paid in the morning and waited until evening to spend it, your wages would have lost half their value by sunset. Wives meet husbands at the factory gate, take the cash, and run to the grocery store before prices change. Restaurants stop printing menus. They write prices on chalkboards and update them between courses. A man in Munich orders 2 beers, drinks one, then orders a second beer. The waiter says, You should have ordered both at once. They cost more now. A woman leaves a basket of cash outside while she goes into a shop. Comes back. The money is still there. The basket is gone. Banknotes get burned for heat. The paper is worth more as fuel than as currency. Children build forts out of bricks of cash because cash costs less than wooden blocks. Erica has stopped going to the bank. The bank no longer matters. She has stopped counting. Every morning, Wilhelm, now 8 years old, asks her if they have food. Some mornings she has to say no. She still has the Sparbuch, the little book with the number in it. 30,000 marks. The savings of a dead husband. The future of a living son. One day in November, when it's particularly cold, she tears a page out of it to light the stove. Paper burns nice. Pages of a useless savings book burn just as well as any other paper. Chapter 5. The Cure. November 15th, 1923. A man named Hjalmar Schacht takes over the German currency system. He has just been appointed currency commissioner, a job that didn't exist a month earlier, because nobody thought it needed to exist. Schacht does something that, on paper, sounds like a magic trick. He introduces a new currency, the Rentenmark. He declares, "From now on, 1 Rentenmark equals 1 trillion old marks." He sets up the exchange, and the Rentenmark is backed not by gold. Germany has no gold left, but by mortgages on German land and German industry. Every Rentenmark represents, in theory, a tiny piece of a real building, a real factory, a real farm. So, does it work? Inflation stops, not over years, not over months, within weeks. By December 1923, 6 weeks later, prices in Germany are stable. How? Because the lesson of hyperinflation is the lesson nobody wants to teach you in business school. Money is not paper. Money is not metal. Money is belief. People accept paper for goods because they believe other people will also accept that paper for goods. When the belief dies, the paper dies. When the belief comes back, the paper is worth something again. Schacht gave Germans something to believe in. He stopped printing. He backed the new currency with real things, not promises. And the country slowly started to breathe again. Case closed. Wrong, because the mark was saved. But the people who'd held it were not. Chapter 6. The bill that came due, the Rentenmark, stabilized the currency. But the damage was already done. The German middle class, teachers, civil servants, widows like Erica, anyone with savings in a bank account, anyone holding bonds, anyone with a life insurance policy, was wiped out, completely. Multi-generational savings, gone. Pensions, gone. Trust funds, gone. The 30,000 marks Erica had put in the bank in 1920, once enough to buy a house, converted to less than a single new Rentenmark. Not one Rentenmark, less than one. You couldn't buy a postage stamp with the savings of a lifetime. This is the part the textbooks rush past. Germany didn't just lose a currency. Germany lost its middle class. And here's the second part, the part historians argue about for the next 100 years. Just 1 week before Schacht stabilized the country, on November 8, 1923. A 34-year-old failed painter walks into a Munich beer hall, fires a pistol into the ceiling, and tries to overthrow the German government. He fails. He goes to prison. He writes a book. 10 years later, the same wiped-out middle-class voters who lost everything in 1923, who remembered, who never forgave, vote that man into power, with a parliamentary majority. Hyperinflation didn't kill German democracy directly. It killed it in slow motion, across a decade. The Rentenmark stopped the printing. It did not, could not, restore the savings. It did not, could not, restore the trust. And without trust in the system, people will hand their trust to anyone who promises to rebuild it, even a monster. One last thing before you click away thinking, wow, glad that's just history. It's not just history. Venezuela. Between 2017 and 2019, hyperinflation hit nearly 2 million%. People weighed cash on scales because counting it took too long. Lebanon. The currency lost 98% of its value in 4 years. Bank accounts frozen overnight. The middle class wiped exactly like Erica. Turkey. Right now, fighting inflation around 30%, down from a peak near 90. The lira has lost almost 90% of its value against the dollar since 2018. And Argentina. In 2023, inflation hit 211%. Then they did something that should sound very familiar. They stopped the printing. Brutal austerity. A government that refused to fund itself with the press. Their own version of the Rentenmark 100 years later. And it worked. 2 years on, inflation is down near 30%. The cure still works. But 40% of Argentines are still in poverty. The printing stops fast. The damage does not. John Maynard Keynes wrote a sentence in 1919 before any of this had happened. He attributed it to Lenin. Maybe Lenin said it. Maybe he didn't. But Keynes wrote it down, and he was certain Lenin was right. He wrote, "There is no subtler, no surer means of overturning the existing basis of society than to debauch the currency. When you destroy people's savings, you destroy their belief in everything. In banks, in government, in neighbors, in tomorrow. And once that belief is gone, anyone who promises to bring it back will be believed." Next time, we go to Zimbabwe, the only country that ever beat Germany at this game. Subscribe.